Have you ever felt like you're stuck in the pentatonic box? Like no matter how much you play, you're still trapped playing the exact same patterns over and over and over again. Well, by the end of today's video, we're going to understand how the pentatonic scale shapes that you already know how to play, that you've already been playing for ages, perfectly line up with the major scale shapes. This way, you get to keep the ability to play and phrase the way you're already used to, while expanding your knowledge of the fretboard without feeling overwhelmed. And again, visualizing how scale shapes overlap has been an essential skill for me to earn my music degree in the first place, so I can guarantee that it's going to transform your playing as well. Now, you might be thinking, I don't really know all of my major scale shapes yet. Well, don't worry, I've made a full in-depth guide on how to learn the major scale shapes as simply and as fast as possible. There's going to be a link to check that video out in the description, and there'll probably also be something in like the top corner that will take you to that video as well. But I would recommend that you stay and check this video out first before watching that one, because you're going to want to understand how to make music with these major scale shapes first before you start learning them. All too often we get overwhelmed when we're learning something new, so we just resort back to our old pentatonic playing habits. Unfortunately, it's way too easy to get overwhelmed when learning something new, so what are we supposed to do to fix this problem? We need to reframe what we're learning. We're not learning something new with the major scale. We're learning how to expand upon what we already know with the pentatonics by seeing where the major scale adds in, right? So imagine this for me. Imagine you've been living in the same neighborhood your whole life. Like, you know all the fun places to go to, you know where every street and road leads to, and you know all the fastest shortcuts to get around town. Now, let's say eventually you kind of get bored of doing the same things all the time in the exact same place, and you want some new experiences in life. So you decide to move somewhere else. What do you think is going to be easier for you? Moving to a new state inside the country that you're already quite accustomed to, or moving to a new city in a new country that has a completely different language and a completely different culture than what you're already used to, which is going to make you feel like an outsider? Well, as guitarists, it's easy to get overwhelmed and think learning the major scale is like learning to live in a new country, when in reality it's just like exploring a new state. As a teacher, whenever I hear my students try and improvise with the major scale for the first time, suddenly they lose all this kind of like cool bluesy phrasing that they've been playing for a while, and they play something that sounds kind of robotic and scaly that sounds like this. Once we understand that the pentatonic shapes are actually just a fraction of the major scale shapes and are actually hiding inside of the major scale, we can start to play phrases with the major scale that actually sound cool and have some kind of life to them, just like this. So how do we do this? First, we're going to look at how we can combine the pentatonics and major chords in our key to create major sounds, and then we're going to look at how to do the exact same thing for the minor pentatonic scale and where that fits into the major scale as well. Now, you've probably watched a bunch of YouTube videos before and you've learned something from the video, and then like a week later you've completely forgotten it and you never play it again. The reason we forget things is because we haven't tied them to concepts that we already fully understand. So how are we going to make sure that we're not going to do that in today's video and that we actually remember what we learn? We need to tie things to concepts we already understand. Now, everyone watching this video, we fully understand what this G major bar chord is. We all know that we can play a G major chord like this as a bar chord, right? All of us understand that the root note for this G major is on the low E on this 3rd fret. And we probably also might know that the G major scale starts from the note G. Well, this is the note G, this is the G bar chord that we can play, and we can also play our first position of the G major scale from that point as well. So as you can see, this chord and scale originates from the exact same place. So I could play the scale and then go back to the chord, and it all sounds nice and it fits quite well together. What we've done right there, we've learned to tie both a chord and a scale together. Well, there is more to discover here. From this root note over here, we can also play a G major pentatonic shape. Again, different from the major scale. The major scale is 7 notes, the G major pentatonic is 5. And we can play this G major pentatonic scale shape, again from this point over here of the 3rd fret of the low E string. And most of us are going to understand this as the 2nd position of our pentatonic scale. So now let's tie everything together. We have this G major bar chord. We could either play a G major pentatonic from here, or I could play from this G major bar chord a G major scale. So practically speaking, how are we actually supposed to apply this to the fretboard? It's one thing knowing that you can play a bar chord and then there's a pentatonic position and a major scale position that originates from that same note, but how are we supposed to use it to make music? When you're improvising with this G major scale over this G chord, think about using this G major pentatonic position first, and then looking at the points where your G major scale overlaps with that. So as we can see over here, this is my G major scale. So that's the first octave of that right there. Now let's look at the places where we can add in those notes inside of the pentatonic scale. Normally the pentatonic goes from here to here, but if we think about the G major scale, we have this note over here. And then if I do that for the same on the D string as well, so we have this note in the G major scale shape. Let's add that into our pentatonic shape. Now when I add both of those notes in, now that I have the G major scale right over there that's also inside of that pentatonic position. And you just have to do the exact same thing for these higher strings as well. And now we're using the pentatonic shape to play the G major scale. So it's going to be so much easier to improvise over that chord and target those chord tones and use that major scale by thinking about this pentatonic position first and just finding in the extra places where you can add in notes. Right, just a little kind of noodling around there, I guess. And again, you're not only limited to this just one box, you can also branch out a bit. As you can see, this G major scale position, it kind of goes diagonally a bit more this way on the fretboard, whereas that pentatonic position kind of only really goes straight down. Again, we can branch out from here into where that other G major scale shape is and start to include those notes around this G major pentatonic position. Again, it's going to keep you all grounded when you can relate things to your pentatonic shapes and see where the major scale overlaps with it. Suddenly you're playing the pentatonic, but you're just adding in 2 extra notes to get some more colourful sounds out of the instrument. If what you've seen so far is clicking and you're starting to see a bigger picture of the fretboard, check out my step-by-step program for intermediates. I've helped transform directionless guitarists who can only copy other players into guitarists who can confidently improvise through the chord changes. If you want a proven plan that improves your improvisation, check out the link below to book a free demo call so I can diagnose your problems on the instrument and give you a roadmap to progress forward. Now, most guitarists, they don't realize that you can also use the major scale with the minor pentatonic to create minor sounds too. So what do I mean by this? Surely the major scale is just for happy sounds. Well, we know that the G major scale comes from the key of G. And in the key of G, we have 7 different chords that we can use, right? From our G major key signature. We have 7 different chords. We have the 3 major chords, which are the 1, 4, and 5. In the key of G major, the 1 chord is G, the 4 chord is C, and the 5 chord is D. And then we have 3 minor chords as well. That's going to be the 2, the 3, and the 6 chord in our key signature. So in G major, the 2 chord is A minor, the 3 chord is B minor, and the 6 chord is E minor. And then finally, our last one, our odd one out, is the 7 chord, which is going to be diminished, which is going to be F sharp diminished. So that gives us the 7 chords in our key signature. So again, the second chord in the key of G is A minor. We have this A minor bar chord that we can play. And from this A minor, we have this root note over here. Again, we all understand the root note that comes from this bar chord. But again, this is also the root note for the starting point of our minor pentatonic scale. So again, we've tied two things together here. We've tied this bar chord and this minor pentatonic shape. So now whenever we play this bar chord, we have a pentatonic shape that we can kind of add in little extra notes over the top of. Now, what we want to do is relate this back to the key of G major, because A minor, again, is the second chord inside the key of G. So we can also play this second position of the G major scale, starting from the second note that looks like this. And again, we can tie that to this A minor bar chord. But again, now we have kind of like two scale positions, this A minor pentatonic and this A from the G major scale, the second position of the G major scale. And you can see there's actually quite a bit of overlap between that second position of the G major scale and the A minor pentatonic. And we can combine both of them together to create some more interesting sounds. So, when you're playing over this A minor, add in those two extra notes from the G major scale, and you're going to get some more interesting sounds. Again, you want to fundamentally think about this from the framework of that minor pentatonic shape, this box position 1. All we're doing now is looking at the positions of that major scale. So position 1 over here, and position 2. And looking at the points where this overlaps with that A minor pentatonic. And when we add in those extra notes, we get some more interesting sounds. And again, I still get to keep all my bluesy phrasing. I know all these places where I can do bends. Like I can do the classic blues riffs. But now I can add in some extra notes from those two major scale positions. And I get these more kind of sophisticated, interesting sounds, right? Again, I still get to keep all the phrasing inside of my pentatonic shape. I'm just adding in two extra notes to add some more colours. So when you start to combine your pentatonic boxes with your major scale shapes, suddenly we're playing the modes of the major scale now without even being confused by any of this kind of theory nonsense, right? I don't have to confuse you of like what the modes are or anything. Again, we're just combining a major scale shape with a pentatonic shape to create some more interesting sounds. The thing is, you only need 3 things to become an expert level guitarist who has total freedom on the fretboard. And the good news is that anyone who is an intermediate can achieve this. All you need is your pentatonic shapes, your major scale shapes, and your triad shapes, and then you just have to learn how to connect them all together, which isn't really too much of a complicated task once you've learned all of those things. If you want to brush up on your pentatonic scale positions, you can watch this video on the left of your screen. There's going to be a little pop-up to watch a video on the pentatonics. And if you want to master your major scale shapes, check out this full guide that I've made on the right side of the screen as well. Now, if you want to master the triads and combine them with both your scale shapes of the pentatonic and major scales, check out my intermediate transformation on my website. There is a link in the description, and if you're an intermediate, you can book a free demo call with me to find out the problems you have on the instrument and get a roadmap to progress forward.